know, we usually do the ripple effects as well as digital town hall events on each Tuesday of every month, and today is January 24th, 2023. We're going to get started by watching basically the future of some elements with humanity. This is actually a large project. This particular ship is about 60,000 people that it will actually house eventually. We'll just, as people are coming in, we'll just watch this real fast. So for those that haven't seen this project, it's something that's been out and designed for a long time. It's actually tied to a particular government project based out of Saudi Arabia, and tied to the actual Red Sea. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. First, we'll get into basic intros around what this meeting is focused on. We'll talk about advancements for this last week, maybe technologies or alignment with different projects, environments, go-to-market strategies, etc. This is not a support-based meeting, but there are support-based folks on. Elle and then Wally will be joining us, as well as Terrence. We're grateful for their attendance. This is a private membership association. Some of the stuff we'll talk about may be forward-looking. The basic concept is connecting a phone that's decentralized with storage that's decentralized in a similar model to this. So we've been working on it for about 13 years, and there's a lot to it. And when we talk about, you know, this digital world and the jurisdiction being the whole earth, that video that we just showed basically looks at, I'm going to pull open a map here real fast with you. It looks, it's targeted to be built right out of Jeddah, which is on the Red Sea outside of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So for some folks, this is a pretty important part of the world, and a lot of other ships kind of started their journey here. But this ship actually has a shipyard that they're planning to build with it. A lot of other projects are coming out of this ecosystems, but it's nice to see governments getting behind futuristic projects. This is projected to be about 5 years out. But the question is, will these actually be built on the existing analog or fiat-based systems? So imagine, for instance, I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise before, especially cruises that are international cruises. They end up bouncing through jurisdictions that may end up going through different currencies, different laws, different waters, and some of them intentionally cross over different countries. There's reasons for that. A lot of the logic is basically when they go from one country to another, that vessel or that ship or that yacht or whatever it is becomes an environment that is actually a tax-free based environment based upon how they touch bases. So for instance, I remember about 15 years ago, maybe longer, we went on a cruise to each one of the Hawaiian Islands, and then we went outside of the Hawaiian Islands to a place called Kiribati. And I had never seen the island was not tall, or I should say it wasn't high in altitude, maybe 3 or 4 feet over the ocean, but it gave them a jurisdiction where they were able to operate within international waters. And therefore the tax jurisdiction changed. And so when we look at what's going on with that actual build, and then we kind of back out and we look at the Earth, we're getting some feedback. I don't know where it's from, Steve. It might be from your world, bud.
Okay.
Thanks. But you're welcome to unmute anytime. So imagine this whole world, every jurisdiction with these invisible lines that we call borders, and we stick flags and we have different laws or different languages. That's one of the things that I really think has fragmented humanity is languages. But when we look at what technology is doing, it's bringing alignment of languages where we all can actually communicate. I mean, I've personally traveled the world 3 separate times in 3 separate years and been able to communicate in some of the most complicated parts of the world through technology, whether you're talking into a device and that's translating and vice versa, or you're just using technology. Maybe it's Uber in Russia. You can get around easily, or in Saudi Arabia or Greece. So these are similar apps across all these countries and jurisdictions that actually work. So the point that I'm driving at is one language, one people, one world, and maybe innovation actually helping, not just with navigating from, a car or a bicycle or a scooter, but navigating systems and jurisdictions. For instance, instead of jumping in the back seat of an Uber and being driven around in a different jurisdiction, I'll use those jurisdictions that I just talked about. Actually, every one of those drives on the right-hand side. So I'll throw in one that drives on the left-hand side. Let's say we've got visitors from Australia. So let's say left-hand side and right-hand side driving. Is it wise to have someone that has grown up driving in Saudi going to Australia and driving? One would say there may be some accidents that could happen. At least I remember Utah drivers going to Australia or New Zealand, and they didn't have to go through a driving test. They didn't have to go through different things, but those individuals used a passport to get from country to country. And does their driver's license actually tie to that other country? Now, what if we had one world, one people, one system, which most people don't know this, but a majority of the driver's licenses, which by the way, we just talked about this organization being a private membership association. What if I told you that the folks that actually built, at least in most colonialized countries, so Canada, US, pieces down south as well, literally using one company that actually says this is what the laws are on the road. This is what the DMVs adhere to. When you take a driving test, these are the questions that you're actually taking, and how they have similarity. But then when you go to different parts of the world, for instance, think about it. And I've had almost every Tesla made except for the Roadster, which is crazy expensive. And do I trust the thing to actually drive 100% of the time? No. But is it convenient to be able to put it on autopilot and then trust it and go? And I personally, in Utah, I would drive up a canyon and it would actually navigate those canyon turns. Amazing. And now we take it for granted. But 10 years ago, that was not common. That was the first time I saw a steering wheel move in front of you without touching it was crazy. Now it's commonplace. In places like Dubai, so this little part of the world right here, it's actually natural for and this may sound weird, but to have driverless vehicles. So they're actually passing laws and intentionally, I'm sorry, that's guitar, intentionally wanting to have taxis or Ubers that are specifically autonomously driving. So imagine the laws of the land getting standardized and then technology basically taking, and don't get me wrong, we're never going to have one standard for one world. But imagine if technology is smart enough to know that in this country, you drive on this side of the street, in this country, you do this. And there's is there an international driver's license? Yeah, we can say that there is. But the reality is how many of us actually have it versus how many of us get in our local jurisdiction of where we historically have grown up in or live in one area. Maybe it's a country, maybe it's a state, maybe it's a province where we actually get an ID. And the reason that this is important is trying to teach you to think about there's a bigger picture around sovereignty and freedom that we really aren't grasping today, or maybe we're starting to grasp. And when we talk about this ecosystem of the digital world, where technology can actually help set us free, it's using technology in many different ways, starting out with really digital ID. And whether that starts with a phone that kind of ties into access devices, or I should say access systems, whether it's normal identification systems, driver's license systems, voting systems, passport systems, marriage systems, health systems, these systems that we're all a part of in one way or another. Some of us may be filling out a lot of information and doing it repetitively because they're tying to different systems. But what you'll see in the digital ecosystem is all of these systems coming together. Now, the goal is decentralization has to actually come together in such a way where it is not just keeping up with centralization, it actually has to leapfrog it and get in front of it. So decentralized systems must be unified and then basically aligned with countries that actually don't have a dog in the fight of the crazy political mess that is going on worldwide. I spoke with a gal out of Italy yesterday, wonderful lady, and she had fear in her eyes. I won't tell you where I talked to her, but what I will say is she was very frightened because she sees in her own land, and she has a wonderful place that she's grown up on a lake in the middle of the mountains, and she basically has a little bed and breakfast, and people have come there for centuries and centuries, not decades and decades, centuries and centuries. And she said, it's only a matter of time until World War III is here. The armament, the transports, the tanks, the weapons, the battleships that are assembling, it's only a matter of time. And this is her perspective. And she relayed, she says, you're American. And I talk to a lot of Americans, but it's not Americans like you that are honest about what's going on. But what you're saying, Mike, is true from what we're seeing as Europeans. And so what I'm trying to articulate, Margaret, welcome. We can hear your mic, dear. It's good to have you here, though. So the point that I'm trying to articulate is the importance of different parts of the world coming together with unity. And they don't have to be the big folks. Like Russia's the biggest country in the world. China's a massive country. There's different parts that are kind of pulled out when we look at South Africa or Africa. When we look at other parts, it's the opposite. Margaret, I'm going to go ahead and mute you if that's okay. Unless, yeah, there we go. Thank you. So you think about it the opposite way. Instead of looking at the big countries that have a lot of land mass and a lot of weight or a lot of history or a lot of conflict, it's not saying these leaders are good or that country is better, or that soil produces this, or this land has these rights or minerals. We have to think about it from one big globe. And if we were to build systems for this whole earth, we remove the labels, we simplify and just say, you know what? We have land and we have water. And where there's land, we have flags. And you know what's interesting about the meeting last week was, we were talking to a little country, and we literally had the decision makers were on this call last week. So if you weren't here, it was a very special one that I hope that we go back and learn from. And for those of you that are not familiar with where it's located, it's literally in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It is one of the smallest countries in the world. It's the third largest country in the world. It has about 10 kilometers of physical land that's above water, and about 1 million square kilometers. When I said 10, it's 10 square kilometers, and about 1 million square kilometers of ocean. Now, just because it's ocean doesn't mean there's not land there or there's not assets there. Something in the water, under the water, over the water. People may think that, hey, it's not land, so it doesn't have that. Or I've even worked with different cultures and maybe reservations, Indian reservations, where they don't think about what's in the airwaves. They don't think about what's over the earth. They think about what grows on the earth and the mineral rights of what's in the earth, but they don't think about, and it's not just a matter of how we can actually rape and pillage the earth. It's a matter of how can we be good stewards to actually intelligently organize and use what we've been given. The system is so natural in how it works. How plants give off carbon dioxide, we breathe in carbon dioxide, we give off, or we breathe in the oxygen that they give off, and vice versa. What we breathe, they give off, and what we breathe out, they breathe in. I mean, it's just amazing. These systems work together, the ocean, the land, the systems, the hot, the cold, the weather patterns, how they shift. So when we kind of put this all together, what we're talking about is this last couple of weeks, we've been working with different countries that actually are not huge. Some of them are very strategic in things. And I'm going to pull up a real quick slide here. So these are the 3 different countries here. Okay. So the first one is a very small part of the world, but a very important part of the world. Why? Because they'll actually take their systems and they will take them and build them on the digital world from day one. When I say day one, I'm talking about the first digital nation in the world. I'm going to tighten this up here for you. I apologize not having the first digital nation in the world, leveraging the digital world technology and framework. From there, digital ID. From there, digital, we talked about a little bit about passports. We talked a little bit about driver's licenses. What if in the digital world you could actually take a driver's license test and it could go country to country? And if you needed to go, if you're traveling from, let's say, I'll use 2 environments that I know well, Utah to New Zealand, it actually helps you to understand what the differences are. So if you've already gone through and taken your certification and passed your test for Utah, and then you go to a new country, because I personally know people that have come from Utah, went to New Zealand, rented a car, and died. 3 of them. They literally died. Wonderful family, just taking a holiday, getting away, and they're no longer physically with us. That's reality. And it was a simple law that they didn't understand. Some other things that I think is important for you to understand is you can't just say, well, that's somebody's fault, and we're going to go and sue them for this or do that. No. We live in one world with one people, and we need to be accountable to one another. So it's not a matter of a lawsuit's going to make something right. These people are no longer breathing. We need to be organized in how this technology and innovation can actually help humanity. And so these people went through the passport system. They had driver's licenses. They They were actually, they were in the medical industry themselves, very affluent, but they didn't understand a simple process with a left-hand turn in a left side driving ecosystem. It's just you. So imagine if they could have come on and before they got on the road, they go through a simple quiz. I mean, I personally, this last week, I took a 40 question quiz. I didn't get all of them right, but I took a 40 question quiz that was a helper quiz. And I actually took screenshots of what I got wrong. And then when I go test, right before I test, I'll go through those screenshots and I'll remember the things that I actually got wrong. So hopefully when I test, I don't get them wrong. The reason that I tell you this is not because we're going to save lives because of a right hand or left hand. I personally think it's ridiculous that we can't all just drive on the same side of the road. I think it's ridiculous that inches and kilometers and miles and Fahrenheit and Celsius can't all just be standardized. For me, I'm an American. I've grown up with miles and inches and Fahrenheit, but to be honest with you, the whole system is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. The metric system makes so much sense. You know, you go 1,000 miles, you go, it's freezing or it's hot, it's boiling or it's cold, it's 100 or it's 0. It just makes so much sense. The way the ratchets work, all of it just makes so much sense. So standardization can actually get us a long ways. I'm not saying we're going to boil that ocean right now, but what I'm trying to drive at is through unifying the ability to have standards, especially as we're bringing up this new digital ecosystem, these different countries. So for instance, let's say in Saudi, they were actually willing to adopt, for those of you that were late, we went through a video earlier on that looked like this. So it showed a ship like this that basically will have a different kind of ecosystem and jurisdiction that it will float in. It will go from country to country. It will have, imagine if it has its own ability to transact, internal, and then islands that it touches upon, those islands have their own ability to transact, whether it's financial transactions, whether it's identity transactions. But imagine where they can actually not just be centralized and controlled, but where they can actually be decentralized with the individual in control. And so imagine if Saudi got behind a project like this, and the project used technology, identity, financial systems, all from the digital world. When you go and combine that with other projects, kind of like what we're talking about here with, let's say, one of these small little islands, or let's even say something like Tuvalu or Vanuatu, or simple islands, maybe Rarotonga or Aitutaki, or simple places that they could actually have the ability to financially transact. And as they're rolling out, for instance, in Tuvalu, they only have one internet connection, but it's only a matter of time until everything is connected. And as everything starts coming online, when you bring in the internet connections and the only connectivity that it ever has, you just bring it up in a digital way. So you bring it up in a way that basically says, if you're going to take payments, you're going to take them in this way. There is no need to set up the Visa, MasterCard, Discover systems in these ecosystems. You can build from the ground up. And that's why thinking the opposite as the digital world rolls out, which, by the way, I've had some questions this last week, primarily around go-to-market strategies on the Clear United people telling people membership, is it a viable model? And I absolutely believe that it is. And I'm glad that we started with it. I think it was the right way to give people the opportunity to tell other people, to be involved. Has it gone as smooth as possible? No, it's been very sad to see how many people would bring in other people just to get numbers and revenue, and then to basically take things. And I'm not saying that they intentionally stole, but it's hard. It's really hard, especially from some other team members that we work with perspective. They struggle with it, to see how much time and effort, and we pay to build this stuff. We pay to work. We pay we made money in other ecosystems that we dump into this because we see humanity is in crisis. Whether you realize it or not, we're in a time of proving where, and I think it's a good thing. I think that humanity will actually come together. I think, look at 9/11. That was terrible. 5, 6,000 people passed away, but you saw countries and states and families come together like we've never seen before. At least I've never seen before. It was just 60 years ago that the Second World War with battles and things that my generation and a majority of the generations on here never saw or experienced. So I guess my point is we don't need to fear with what's coming, but we need to gain alignment. And it's hard to be able to work tirelessly. For me, I don't feel like I personally work, but it's difficult to be able to see folks that come in and will tell other people about it, and then take a phone, even though only 1 or 2 months on a 24-month subscription was paid. Take a payment even though a payment wasn't received. And I think a lot of it, Clear United and the systems have to take accountability to make sure that the math is done right. And, those things are there. But there's a lot of folks that just, I have to stand up and say, there's a lot of folks that said, I really believe in this and I want to tell my friends, I want to tell my families about it. And they did. And they did a lot. And I really feel like the best effort and energy was put forward, but it's not enough. We have to grow this faster. The awareness, the adoption. And so what you're looking at is basically a go-to-market segment strategy that talks about Clear United, people telling people, whether it's your friends, your family, people that care about privacy or security. And then there can be partners. So maybe this ties to an insurance ecosystem or a company that wants to tie payments to all of its team members in jurisdictions. Maybe it's just at one country or more. Maybe it's cross-border payments and other things, which we won't talk a lot about right now. And then what we're talking about specifically when I pull open this globe and I talk about a ship and I talk about Saudi and Dubai and Abu Dhabi and different countries in that part of the world, and then we link that. Boy, this really messed up here. It's so cool. I don't know if you haven't seen this, but the stars actually pull out. So let's try and get this thing back right-sided. So imagine a sail that actually doesn't just, because you got to think about it. If they're going to spend $5 billion, they're not just going to let that thing sit in port. They're going to connect the world in a way that we haven't seen the world connected. Yes, we've seen yachts. Yes, we've seen cruise ships. Yes, there are 2,000 people to 5,000 people from a commercial cruise ship standpoint, and yachts. You can, it could be a simple family. But the point that I'm trying to make is, imagine where a destination for these are intentionally designed in a digital ecosystem, where payments and identification and really the basis of a new ecosystem can start. It's not just one country. It's not just one province. It's not just one state. It's not just one county. Imagine if you can start rolling this out in such a way where the systems are mature enough to be able to run a country, identity, financial transactions, the currency of the country, the banking of the country, the marriage tied to the individual, the healthcare, the land management, asset management. And it's not just asset management for companies, but it's for individuals or for families. And it's not just for a certain time, it's for generations over time. So it's got a lot of organizational thoughts to it, but it really is built for the earth. And people can say, I want to be a part of this, instead of I'm a citizen because I was born in this hospital or in this hut in the middle of this location or providence. So it's really changing the way that we've thought about really the world. And so imagine governments that say, we actually want to be a part of that new ecosystem that's rolling out. And the big ones that are already out there and have a ton to lose, and really they've already been taken over. We've talked a little bit about this. Let me see if I can find a couple slides. We've talked a little bit about secret combinations, and these secret combinations operate in different circles, whether it's media, health, tech, you've got finance, you've got pharmaceutical, they just keep going. And then they basically take over governments. And when we talk about governments, those governments have land jurisdiction or asset jurisdiction that they're over, and they can create assets from those. And that's another thing. A lot of these islands, they don't sell their land. They literally lease it. And when you don't sell it and it's owned by the people, so to speak, from a gift of a creator, it's a different perspective. And so I hope you understand that when you look at big countries, like look at what's on the right here, and this, again, this is 2-3-year-old data, but the fiscal spending and the monetary policies and the dollars and cents don't add up. And so building a parallel system that can actually get folks on board with a new way of doing things that actually adds up. It's cryptographically proven. It has a ledger that's transparent. Everyone can see what happens. You may not know the identities of the individual, but that creates sovereignty. That creates privacy. That creates freedom. And it's not the privacy that I'm talking about in these slides. I'm talking about the individual being able to control their own data through two simple things. You take technology that's decentralized and technology that's open source. The combination of decentralization and open source literally enables these new ecosystems and types of countries, which these are countries that have active dialogue right now. And it really, imagine just those three maps. I won't even be specific on the details, but imagine if those three ecosystems actually came together and they said, we'll have a project like this crazy boat, and we'll look at different jurisdictions that it can work within. And you know what? We'll work within the fiat system, but we're going to build it in the new digital ecosystem. There's something there. There's something there that is massively important. And those are the things that we have been historically focused on. The systems are built. Are they perfected? No, but they're built. The architecture's there, the framework's there, and there's a massive importance of alignment. And timing is very key, but at the same time, things are going to happen within the earth and the world based upon choice. And it could be a simple shot that gets fired that starts a chain of events. It could be a simple submarine that launches something that starts a chain of events. But in the end, this is an amazing earth. I don't know about you. Sometimes you just look up at the stars like I did last night, and it's just an amazing time to be here, an amazing place to be in the physical body. This last week, I personally I went to one of these events. I don't know specifically how I picked it up, but I haven't had food poisoning or sickness for a long time. But that was basically a good chunk of this last week. But it helps give you an appreciation for the body and for this earth that you get to enjoy based upon having a strong body. So I'll stop blabbing there. We've gone through a lot of topics. We've a ton of different topics. Are there any questions that folks may have, or things that you'd like to touch on or jump through? If so, feel free to raise your hand or talk.
I think somebody had a hand up first, so I don't know if they want to go first. Otherwise, I'll blabber away.
Go ahead. I don't see another hand. Margaret. Margaret, if you want to unmute, you're welcome to do it. Otherwise, Becca's going to go first. Go ahead, Becca.
Hi, Michael.
Hello.
That is amazing. Do people get, that's so exciting. what you were showing there.
Mhm. It
I
really
just
is.
want to scream it. I really just want to scream it out to the world, but they just don't believe it's coming, even though it's in front of their face. You know what I mean? Does it make sense?
You know,
That
when I was young, I used to question, why would 60 million people die in a Second World War? Why wouldn't they fight? Why wouldn't they stand up? Why would they just get on these trains? Why would they go and just stay in these little camps? And then why would they go in these buildings and then just die? I don't understand it. But when you
it
look,
is amazing.
I mean, it's like we have to do something. We can't just sit back. So, but go ahead and make
Yeah.
your point, Becca, because
Yeah.
I think you're spot on.
Just on that, I had I love Tony Robbins,
Mhm.
and this morning I had a VIP session with him, and one of the
With him directly?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. There was about 400 of us, but we all asked questions.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love Tony.
And yeah, he's great. And I love the energy that he brings, and more people need to have that energy. But one of the takeaways that I got from that was proximity is power. And a lot of people think that they can't step into that giant power that is out there trying to control them, you know?
Totally.
And having the courage to actually speak about there's another way. It's not that it's not your way, but maybe we can work together to actually come to a better way together. And a lot of people just I don't know, like I try to break that mentality. It's the scarcity mentality. But that was just a takeaway that I got this morning. So I just wanted to share that power, proximity is power.
Can you expand upon that? Proximity. Dig into proximity.
So he was talking about he provided a situation where he was with a billionaire of Canada, and he was terrified to meet these billionaires. He was terrified to meet them because he didn't know how to act. He didn't know what they were. And one of the Canadian billionaires said to him was, you, like, you. He couldn't really understand what he was talking about. And then Tony was like, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? And then the billionaire said to him, you're good. Everyone talks about you, Tony. Tony, you're good. And so he was scared and fearful of these billionaires. But in the end, he did a great thing. He was talking what he thought, and to break this fear that we have in the world, and we can create things, and we can remove the dogma that we all have in our lives, and just take that little step forward at one at a time, and believe. So yeah.
I think that belief side of it is such a big thing, and it's neat to see or hear someone like Tony that's impacted. He's impacted millions and millions of lives, including mine, in a very positive way, because he's helped us to believe in ourselves and who we are. So, and I would also go a step further. Like some of these flags that I pulled up, the individuals that we're working with, they're very influential individuals, but they're all just like us. Each one of us, we're all the same. There's, Tony puts his pants on the same way that majority of the people or dresses on as the rest of us. So it's like, how can we actually, to your point, unite together to actually make a difference? And I know we're just, we've been doing this for 13, 14 years from a decentralized approach, and 2 years from an awareness approach. And, I don't know, spent long time building on the right, the storage and the operating systems, and on the left, the phones and the decentralized systems there and operating systems, but standing on the work of others. And so it's a matter of how can we really come together to actually make a system that is worthy or worth all of us uniting behind. And I know that this isn't perfect today, but it is an attempt to try and actually provide value that future generations can get behind and stand behind. Do we have a lot of work cut out for us? Absolutely. Is it something that can totally be achieved? I think with enough time and with enough money, and it's not that you have to have a massive amount of money, but you have to have enough runway to have the time and the cash flow to be able to get to that. And that's why it was hard earlier when we talk about this go-to-market strategy, where it's hard to see influencers that would actually they would have people that wouldn't be accountable to commitments, yet they want to have the cash flow that ties to the other side of it. And so we've been able to make massive strides in getting alignment with that. And we hope to be able to see a counterbalance. So it's like, hey, we'll just offset it and then we'll just keep cranking with it. But really, I hope what you're seeing is it's not just about Clear United and people telling people. It's about a digital world that actually leverages this whole beautiful physical earth, but it actually ties to different governments that are willing to say, we see this and we're willing to be a part of it. And it's not easy. I mean, what's happened with the World Economic Forum and the United Nations since 1971, which is 4 years before I was born, these guys have had a massive head start. They have a ton of runway, and this last week was another one of their World Economic Forums in Davos. And, I'm not going to say negative things, even though there's a ton of it in my mind for what they're doing to humanity, how they will actually, well, I won't even go there. Because I've been to these events, I've seen what they're doing, and it's not a positive thing for the general humanity. It is truly around what we talked about here with these secret combinations. It really is. So with that being said, I'd like to show you some things that are coming up if you haven't actually seen it. So this is an event, March 28th. It's not on that big ship that we showed you earlier. It's a smaller ship. It actually only holds about 2,000 people, but it's a wonderful, stable ship. It's actually been in 2019, 2020, when all the ships basically had COVID, they went through and redid all of the interior. But it starts in Sydney and it ends in French Polynesia, or Tahiti. So it goes to New Caledonia, Vanuatu, Fiji, Samoa. It goes to a couple different islands in Samoa, and then 4 different stops over 15 days within French Polynesia or Tahiti, those areas. It's 1,700. You can pay with multiple different assets, whether fiat or crypto based. There's availability still, even though we're under a couple months from sale. Wonderful amenities. Like I said, it's basically brand new inside. We actually are given the same stage that these folks get to play on. The digital world is actually given the auditorium to be able to go through and do some giveaways and some fun stuff around Clear Nodes and other events. I'm actually going to put a link to this inside of the chat. This is the first time that the link has actually been shared publicly. We've kind of told you that it's coming, but yeah. So this is.
Did you say that it leaves from Sydney?
Yeah.
Sydney, Australia. Oh wow. Okay.
That's right. Yep.
And does it, when you say it ends in French Polynesia, does it go back to Sydney, or does it end and then?
There actually is another. There is another. It's the same ship, but there's another cruise that does go back. Yep. Right.
Okay.
So the one that we're particularly talking about starts in Sydney and ends in Tahiti, but it doesn't include the one that goes back.
Right. I'll have a look.
So, yeah. So that's basically the events, the venues. There will be different rewards that will go through a process of proving out exactly what we're talking about. So imagine if different shops would accept a payment that's not just a fiat payment. Now, you got to realize we're going on 15 different days to 5 different jurisdictions and 5 different currencies. And today we say, hey, I use Visa, and that's how I do all my exchanges. Well, there's a better way, and we'll show some of those better ways that are there. And along so doing, we'll basically have different games And every day we'll actually give away, at least 5 days, we'll give away these different clear notes for folks. The link that I shared with you has presentations from prior events that we've done. These presentations are second to none if you really care about decentralization and the folks. This was primarily before we actually decentralized a lot of what the organization stands for and is built, but you're welcome to watch some of these wonderful, really, really good presentations, especially, I would say, if you watch any, watch them from Conrad. Watch Jason, this is a really good one. Lee, this is a really good one. Amelia, top notch, very, very good. She's actually a county commissioner. We'll end today's meeting with her, but yeah. So again, this is an event, solid event, and it's going to kind of set a precedence that shows how these different types of cruises that go through different jurisdictions can actually start working in a unique, different way. And it's what we call, it's an approach that's the last will be the first and the first will be the last. Like, for instance, what country doesn't have internet in the world that you know of? You know, some of those small countries. And if you really want to get specific, for those of you that weren't here last week, we went through a presentation from this gentleman, and I'll just play it at the beginning so you can kind of see it. Amazing, absolutely amazing human, Simon. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Talofa and warm Pacific greetings from Tuvalu. Last year, I addressed this August assembly proclaiming that we must take bold and alternative action today to secure tomorrow. I explained that although we needed global collaboration to end the climate crisis, we in the Pacific would not sit idly by and wait for the world to act. Today, I speak again from my country, from a small islet that is likely to be one of the first spots in Tuvalu to be submerged by rising sea levels. Since COP26, the world has not acted, and so we in the Pacific have had to act. We have seen temperature rise projections remain well above 1.5 degrees Celsius, foretelling the imminent disappearance of islets like this one. We have had to take our own precautionary steps with the Future Now project. As our land disappears, we have no choice but to become the world's first digital nation. Our land, our ocean, our culture are the most precious assets of our people. And to keep them safe from harm, no matter what happens in the physical world, we'll move them to the cloud.
So I want you to just think about what he just talked about. He's talking about global warming, which is actually going to be a bigger topic than this pandemic and COVID combined. I mean, all of it. You know, when we talk about credits and measuring in the digital world and financial reset, and it's gonna, global warming, the topic itself will be bigger than the shot, than the virus, than the productivity, than the financial impacts that COVID/pandemic has basically brought on humanity. And they're right in the middle of it. Their nation, by the end of this century, is planned and won't even be there. It's going to be underwater all the way. So we talk about the 10 square kilometers today and their country being 100 or 1 million square kilometers. We're talking about forecasting that it actually goes away. Now, some would argue that's because of how we consume energy as an individual, how we drive our cars, how we do this. I would argue that this wonderful earth that we get to live on, look at the clouds, look at the shifts. It's natural. As a matter of fact, I'll pull up another. Let's look at it a different way. Let's look at it from a standpoint of wind, or we can look at it from a standpoint of heat. So if you understand, for instance, and one of the biggest eye openers was when we went from the northern hemisphere in Utah, cold, down to the southern hemisphere in New Zealand, and we looked at the temperatures and how they shifted, but how they shifted in different times of the year. And it's just amazing how seasons work, how this earth just works. And it's something that actually balances and cleans itself. Does that mean that islands come and go? That may be a reality. But just like how Simon says, I used to say that when I was a kid. We have to act. And if that means that the digital world and digital nations start stemming from that as a byproduct, then so be it. Do we have all the answers? No. But do we have to have at least enough faith to figure out that there's a different way and we don't just have to be a byproduct of these secret combinations that will just create a centralized system that will take away choice, that will take away freedoms, that will take away privacy, and that will ultimately take away sovereignty, not just of the individual, but of the family and possibly of this earth, all in an attempt to be able to save something. I'm not saying that we give up and we let little countries like what Simon's talk about literally drowned and disappear, or cities. I mean, you look at Italy, you look at Manhattan, you look at these cities that are so close to sea level. You know, does water melt? Do these polar, if you look at this, you got these purple ecosystems. I mean, you know, people talk about how it shifts. We just don't have enough data would be my answer. We don't have the thousands of years to be able to see. We can do certain things from carbon dating and looking at systems and testing different things. Yes, there's a ton to learn, but I believe that over time, this earth actually gets warmer and colder. And that's one of the reasons why we can actually be here. The water, the systems, and that's what balances it out. The water is so important. You know, scientists, some say that the organisms came from the water. I'd say it's one system that works together. And can we actually do things that are better as humanity and how we're actually approaching systems and technologies and how governments work? I mean, I've been to China. I've seen the days and the weeks where you don't see the sun because of the smog. And it's because of how they're polluting it. Does that mean that someone that's driving an electric car versus a gasoline car should be treated differently? I'm not saying that either one of them was right, because they both have their impact on culture, society, this earth, you know, and humanity. But it's a matter of how do we work together as one, but still at the same time not take away freedoms, sovereignty, privacy. And it's not privacy for privacy's sake. It's privacy for identity's sake. So I'll stop blabbing. We've got enough time for another question. If someone has one, we'll go ahead and open
Michael,
it up. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Bob. How are you?
Hi, Bob. Good, buddy. How are you?
Good. Hey, is the cruise that you just shared with us, is that in addition to the one in September, or?
Right now, we're planning on one in September. It's the same type of structure, but it's up in Alaska. And
Right.
it depends on how successful this is, to be honest with you. You know, we may get 50 people that turn out. We may get 500. We may get 10. We don't know. I can tell you the people that have already signed up for it are very influential and key, and they tie directly to the topics that we've been discussing today. Different countries that are standardizing on it. Some of them, you know, they'll be setting up their phones for the first time. Some of them will have operated on them for years and years, many years. Some of them may care about nodes. Some of them may care less about it. But the simple answer is we plan on having both of them. The September one will really be dependent on the success here, primarily because a lot of the work that's materializing is actually materializing in the South Pacific, not in the North Pacific. But the beautiful thing is when we talk about this type of a little creature going around the ocean, there's really a connection with the Red Sea and the Pacific Ocean. That's one of the big things that's kind of being foretold and looked at. So imagine if this system operates within a digital ecosystem. So for instance, you own a percentage or a day or a piece of, whether it's a boat or whether it's a hammock or whether it's a suite inside of this thing. That's basically how they'll all be monetized, and assets will be transferred, value will be transferred. But the goal is to basically use this venue to explore all of it and the potential of all of it. So I can tell you that this March 28th is a 100% go. You would have already seen the event in September. That will be a go, but I don't know if it's going to be as big or as relevant as this one. Does that answer your question, Bob?
Yes, yeah, because I was planning on the September one, but this one kind of popped up in short notice for me.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's a hard one for you. Maybe what we do, because this dollar amount is locked in, it won't go up. So maybe what we do is we wait until we get closer. Even though with a 15-day cruise, you want to make commitments and plans now, or as soon as you possibly can. But maybe you just wait on it, Bob. Maybe you wait and see how it materializes, see how things feel in your own world. I can tell you that some of the flights are actually less expensive the closer you get, believe it or not. So maybe you just kind of pay attention to that and see if there's others that are going that you're already familiar with as well. I can tell you that there's some good folks that are going on this. A lot of it is going to be the same topic that we just discussed, where governments are coming together and the digital world is getting adopted. So.
Okay. Another question: did they, the people from Tuvalu, did they figure out their monetary system?
Yeah. So what we came up with was, instead of just doing the amount issued, because we got everything done, but the amount issued and the amount authorized, and it really, it's a hard topic. And where we ended up was, we will actually code out so that they don't have to put a cap on it. They can do what every other country does, where they just increase spending as they want to. And so, but if they're backing it with real assets like their land and et cetera, their minerals and their tuna and others, it's going to have that same amount of value. And they're actually pegged to the Australian dollar anyways. So it's not like it needs to float around with that. So that was the resolution, which is there is no mandatory cap. We will enable it so the technology can remove the cap. And that's a perfect example of how, a council or humanity can come together and say, this is actually the ideal scenario. Let's make that work. And then we tell the developers what to do. And the next thing you know, a checkbox appears and you don't have to be limited. So that'll be a feature rolling out in the digital world for digital assets. Does that make sense?
Yep. Cool.
Yeah. Good questions. Really good questions. Well, it's good to connect with everybody. Appreciate who you are, and we'll go ahead and leave real fast. I don't know if you want to watch this or not, but I think that this is definitely this from Amelia is definitely relevant and worth watching if you'd like to. So I'll go ahead and let this stream.
Well, thank you.
Log out myself.
When Michael asked me to come speak, he didn't say, first I'm going to have an Avenger, and then I'm going to have Wonder Woman, and then you're going to speak, right? Seriously? Like, I think I got the short end of this stick, I'm just saying. Right? And then we're going to have the government come speak to you. Okay, so I'm gonna try not to put you to sleep after, you know, the Marvel universe and the DC universe both spoken. Okay, so my name is Amelia Powers Gardner, and I am a Utah County Commissioner. This is Utah County. Welcome to my home. We're happy to have you all here. A little bit about Utah County. We are the second largest county here in the state of Utah, but we are by far the most conservative. If you look at political parties, I, like Jason, I lean libertarian. I call myself a Republicarian.
I like it.
I'm a Republicarian. And it's funny, actually, this morning I've been on the phone with the Utah Speaker of the House, because as the second largest county in Utah, one of our problems is that Salt Lake County is Democrat and significantly more liberal, whereas Utah County is the second largest county. We are conservative. And so we're actually working together to try to come up with a plan to actually lead the state, because rather than relying on the biggest county to lead the state, I don't want their leadership. Right. So we're looking to lead in another way. And like Michael said, I ran for office a few years ago, 2018. I have a lot of people that come to me and say, I'm thinking about running for office, what do you think? And this is what I tell them. Unless you feel called to run for office, don't do it. Running for office is the worst. I actually got a meme yesterday that I downloaded on my phone that one of my friends sent me. And it said, have you ever heard a rumor about yourself? And you're like, dang, what did I do next? That's like running for office. You find out all sorts of horrible things about yourself that you didn't even know. Right? So if you don't have to run for office, don't. But if you feel called to run for office like I did, then do. And when I ran for office in 2018, I did not know why I was running for office. I was thinking, like, do I need a mental evaluation? Like, why am I doing this? I signed up to take a 60% pay cut to come and run for office. At the time, it was to become the county clerk auditor. And I was like, why in the world am I doing this? And then I talked a couple of my friends into taking giant pay cuts to come work for me. And we were pretty sure that all of us needed a mental health evaluation. But after being in office for about 2 years, it really became apparent to us why. And this is why. And of all the places, I mean, why are you running for county clerk? Like, who even knows who their county clerk is? Okay, so like one person in the room knows who their county clerk is. So why would I take a 60% pay cut to run for county clerk? That's a good question. Yeah, fame. That's it. Fame, power, and money. That's why I ran for county clerk. You'd be surprised how many people think that. Like, look, you don't even know what your county clerk is. So as I was in this position, and as my friend was in this position, we realized why. And this is why. And it's transparent, decentralized, and innovative government. How many of those words do you equate with government? Right, absolutely. But what we realized is that as the county clerk and the county auditor, it's a dual position in Utah County. We like low taxes, so we give every person 2 jobs. I was clerk and auditor. And we could create a transparent, decentralized, and innovative government. And that matters. Is this one? Okay, here we go. So how does the US government work? I think, did you cover this already? So I'll step on this really quickly, but it's basically the federal government. And how many people from here are not from the United States? A few, okay. So the federal government is only given the powers that are specifically called out to them in the Constitution. Yeah. That means that it's by nature, the United States government is decentralized. Okay? So that the states have the rest of the power, and each state governs differently based on its population, its particular issues, its particular preferences. Beyond that, we have the counties. Now, the counties are given certain authority. They're given the authority to run elections. They're given the authority to do a lot of the identity documents and criminal justice. So in the Constitution, we elect sheriffs, and sheriffs are county level, right? And then the cities determine next level. So by nature, the United States government is decentralized, and that's really important. Yeah, I'm facing the wrong way here. So what's our roadmap from where we are now to where we need to be? The first place we need to start is identity. What elements make up your identity? You think about it, if you have to go get a passport, for example, what type of documents do you need? Birth certificate, driver's license, social security number. If you're a woman and your name is different than the one on your birth certificate, or you need your marriage certificate, you need all these documents. Now, what is common with all of these documents? Government, whether it's county clerk or sometimes it's state, it's government. We get these documents from the government. And if you lose that document, then you have to go back to government and ask them for another copy. Right? So you're literally having to ask government for permission for your identity. Right now, long time ago, there was no other better way to do that. The best way to do that was to go down to your local government and get those documents. Now we have places around the world that don't have that luxury. If you're in the middle of Africa, can you go down to your county clerk's office and get a copy of your marriage certificate? No, you can't. So we have people all over the world. I heard someone earlier was talking about the ability to get independent financing. One of the reasons that we have the ability to get independent financing in this country is because we can prove that we own property. In third world countries, they don't have a government entity that they can go to prove that they own that property. Therefore, they cannot get loans against that property. Therefore, they do not have financial independence. So we start looking at this and looking at it compared to how we are here and how the rest of the world is. So what makes up your identity? How do you prove your identity? And who owns those documents? Do you really own those documents? No. If you have to get permission from someone else, you don't own them. So when you look at control, who controls the government that owns those documents?
Should be the people.
Should be the people. Right. So let's look at how things should be and how they can be. So when you look at making decisions, one of the big ways is elections, right?
Yes.
So I don't know how many of you know that the county clerk is the one in charge of running elections,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
Certified.
in 2020, I was the county clerk. I just became the county commissioner a few months ago, which means that I was the one in charge of running elections. Prior to getting elected in 2018, our county was called the epicenter of dysfunction by the government. That's a quote. Which, by the way, was great for me because I was on the ballot to run for that office. I was like, look at the epicenter of dysfunction. It needs a new leader. So that worked great for me, but it was the epicenter of dysfunction. But I had about 18 months to turn that office around. My office has now been touted nationally as an example on how we should run elections. And I'll tell you how we did it. We did it using radical transparency and innovation and technology. And we've done that as an example nationwide on how we run elections because we did a lot of things that a lot of Republicans don't like. We do online voter registration, we did early voting, we do vote by mail, we use drop boxes. But here's the difference. I did those things in a way that was different. So for example, drop boxes. You've heard bad things about drop boxes. I actually won a national award for having the best drop boxes in the nation. It's called the Clarity Award. But I'll tell you how we did it. We did it using drop boxes. So you've heard horrible things about drop boxes. Well, let me tell you how we do drop boxes. We have 22 drop boxes cemented to the ground throughout the county, and there are cameras on them. Each one of those drop boxes has a locking slot, and we have fire suppression units in them, and they were lined so that they were protected from water. People can go and put their ballot in those drop boxes. When it's time for us to pick up those drop boxes, there's only one set of keys for each drop box, and each drop box, those keys are kept at our headquarters, where they're under lock and key and surveillance. When it's time for someone to go pick up out of a drop box, we get teams of at least 2 people that are certified election judges. They go out together in a rental car, and we actually have a GPS tracker on them, and we can track where they go. And then when they get to the drop box, there's a seal on that drop box. They take a picture of the seal unbroken. They then break the seal. They unlock the drop box. They open it up. Use their phone. They scan a QR code on the inside of the door so that we can geocache the time that they were at that location. They pull all of those ballots out of the drop box and they weigh them, and they take a picture of them weighing them on a fish scale so we know how much they weigh. Then they have to send that picture to us, and the time that we receive that picture is coordinated with the geocache when they open that door, so we know how much time it took them. Then we watch them drive from that location to the next location. If they stop to go to the bathroom, we know. And we want to know why they stopped and where they stopped and how long, okay? Then when they hit all the drop boxes and they get back to the county, then as soon as they get in, each one of their packets that they have sealed and zip tied after they weighed at the drop box is then weighed again at the county, so that we know that the same number of ballots arrived at the county as left. So as I'm telling you this story that this is going to build, technology can be used for good or it can be used for bad. Okay? And technology can, in the election, technology can be used for bad, and in the election, technology can be used for good. I did a lot of things that a lot of people think are bad. We mailed every registered voter a ballot. We used drop boxes. We did online voter registration. We did early voting. But we had really clean voter lists because we spent $70,000 and thousands of hours getting rid of every dead person and person that had moved off of our voter rolls. You heard how we did drop boxes. We heard how we did all these things. So this is really important because as we look at this, there are groups of people that are currently frying me for running an election so well that it's undermining their narrative. But here's the key. It's people on the far right that don't like government, that I align with politically and ideology. They're the ones frying me for running an election too well. Right. So we're going to build on that. So here's the next part. So transparency and security. I am actually leading a team of people, and we are using blockchain technology to bring the future of elections. I've actually worked with Michael on this. We are utilizing, if we can verify your identity through self-sovereign identity, we are utilizing a true blockchain token to have people cast their vote. And the reason that's really important is transparency. If it's on a blockchain, anybody can see how every single vote is cast. But in order to do that anonymously, privacy, which we all care about, then you have to have it encrypted. You need to use cryptographic keys. So it's funny because a lot of people think that the answer to our election solutions is paper ballots across the board. I'm here to tell you, I can tell you 7 different ways to hack a paper ballot election. I've been a county clerk. Do you know what tools you need to hack a paper election? A pen. Right? Yep. But to hack a cryptographically blockchain recorded immutable record would take more than a nation state. Especially because the technology that I utilize has 2 blockchains. Have fun hacking 1, let alone 2. Right? So I'm working with, Ballot Tech is our product of the company that I'm working with, and I'm working with Michael so we can be integrating this. But the future of this is powered by blockchain with radical transparency, right? Radical transparency, but also security of your anonymity, right? Because who makes the decisions? It should be the people. But how are those decisions being made? Well, if you don't know how that decision is being made, and if you can't track that decision, that's a problem. So we need to embrace technology to do that. So next we're going to go to identity. So let's talk about something that we're, Michael said we're actually doing this. Well, let me back up for just a second. On the side of the elections, only 3 jurisdictions in the country utilized a mobile voting platform. We were one of them. We utilized a mobile voting platform for our overseas citizens, our military members, and our disabled voters. And the reason why I did that is that's a small enough group that we can test the technology. Also, those people were voting via email, like hacked every day on every continent, including Antarctica, email. Our military members, overseas citizens, and people with disabilities were voting via email. So I've been piloting online voting with them so that we can work the kinks out. Because what's important is being a beta tester. You guys all know the importance of being a beta tester. We're beta testing this and we're doing it today. And I've done it for 5 elections successfully. So So that's the future, that's what we're looking at. Now the next part of this is marriage certificates. In 2019, before any of us had heard the word COVID, I had this crazy idea to launch a blockchain-based remote marriage license system that gives you a digitally certified marriage license. And everybody thought I was crazy. We launched it in October 2009. I took office in January 2019. We launched the beta version in October 2019. We launched production version in January of 2020. And then March hit.
Yeah.
And there was a time that I was literally the only county in the nation, and as far as we can tell, the only county in the world that can issue a marriage license. So talk about government controlling you. When you look at what a marriage license is, do you realize that what that means is that two consenting adults have to ask the government permission to get married? A marriage license is a permission slip.
Otherwise, it's illegal.
So this is actually the digital copy of mine and Tobin, mine and Tobin's marriage license. So we use mine as the first example. And this is the digital copy of the marriage license. You can see that it's got this is what the digital seal. When you pull out like a birth certificate or a marriage license, you know that like raised part of it, that's the seal. Yeah. Right, that's the seal. This is the seal for our marriage license. So I'm gonna scroll down. Oh, there's two. Can we go to the next? Oh, no, sorry. There's just the second page of the marriage license. Pull that one back up, and then there was 2 pages. So, yeah. I'm gonna pull that one. So page 1 shows us the seal, and then page 2 is like the marriage license. So see, you can see this. You can see where there's like a little stamp in the corner. That's your traditional seal. But up in the top, scroll down a little bit so we can see the very, very top of this page. Right there, you see that Ethereum ID? That Ethereum ID means that this document is sealed on the Ethereum blockchain. So what we've done in Utah County is we took your government issued ID, and instead of saying you have to have this physical piece of paper, if your house burns down and that piece of paper burns down, you no longer own your identification, you have to go somewhere else to get it. We've now created it digitally. You can save it. You can save it on your clear phone. I actually have mine on my phone. When I go into a bank and say I need to change my name, I got married, and they say I need a copy of your marriage license, I'm like, what's your email? And I can email it to them. So you can now save your document digitally, and it's a certified copy because it's got the Ethereum ID that tells us that this is a sealed document on blockchain. You can do this on any blockchain. You can do this on ClearNotes, you can do this on Ethereum, you can do this on Bitcoin. So this is step 1. Let's go back to the So when he says that we're actually doing it, in 2020, we did 10,700 of these in Utah County. So this isn't a theory. This is what we're actually doing. So we gotta look at the acceptance of the documents. That's the next big thing. I've been in talks with United States Senator Mike Lee and United States Congressman John Curtis, and both of them are willing to run a bill to the federal government that says if a local government creates a digital document, then the federal government has to recognize it as a valid digital document. So the next steps are going to be obviously birth certificates, driver's licenses, and other documents. Right? We start by creating our documents. Okay, so the next steps, we need to get key documents need to be digital. Key documents need to be digital. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, identity documents. And then, once we have digital documents, we need to make sure those digital documents are accepted. The Social Security Administration is giving us a little bit more time right now. Like I said, but we've got a senator, a congressman, they're going to help us out, so we're good. And once those documents get accepted, then the next step is to realize that you own your documents, the government doesn't. The government might create them, and the government might certify them, but if they're digital, and you can prove that it's real without having to ask the government's permission by going to a public blockchain, then you will own your documents. After you own your documents, then the next step is we have to decentralize all of this. And not just decentralize, but It needs to be in a distributed ledger. So these are our steps, right? We decentralize it, then we distribute it. And then we need to look at distributed networks. Everyone here has a node sitting by you, right? Now, even if there's a digital document, if the government owns access to that digital document, then you don't actually own it. But if we have all of this on distributed nodes, then the government can't shut it down. A company, big tech can't shut it down. In fact, a company combined with the government couldn't shut it down because everyone knows their own node. Make sense? So once we have those nodes, once we utilize open source, then we can go to sovereign ownership, and every one of us can own our documents. Now, this is a really big thing for us here in the United States, but can you imagine if we live in a third world country that has an unreliable government? Can you imagine what this would do to the citizens of the world? It's freedom for everyone in the world, and the ability to access capital for everyone in the world. I mean, we talk about, freeing people. There are literally billions of people on this planet that if they can have access to their documents and they can prove who they are. Imagine how, let's just look at current events. Let's look at the evacuation in Afghanistan. One of the reasons that it was so difficult to evacuate so many people from Afghanistan is because the State Department had to vet every single one of those refugees to ensure that they weren't terrorists. What if they owned their documents and they could prove to us they were who they said they were by showing us their phone? Way quicker, way more efficient if you're not twice as many people out. Right, so what are the roadblocks? One of the biggest roadblocks is fear of technology, right? Because as we go and as bad people use technology for bad things, then we have a natural tendency to say, well, I'm gonna go back to paper. Did you know that Lyndon B. Johnson, former president of the United States, it is a proven fact that he stole his senatorial election? It's a proven fact that when Lyndon B. Johnson ran for Senate, he cheated on paper ballots at the polls on election day and became a United States Senator. And then later became a vice president and became a president. So is the way to keep people from stealing elections to go back to the paper at the polls on election day?
No.
But that's what everybody's saying. But it's because they're afraid of technology, because technology has been manipulated. But guess what? That's why you have to do it transparently. That's why we need to look at it. So fear of technology is important. Fear of how others use technology. And fear of the unknown. But what's the common denominator in all of this? Fear. So our two previous speakers spoke about this, and I was really excited. I was working on my presentation, so I was like, I don't know if I should stand up and yell hallelujah, or if I should keep trying to get this done for y'all. But they're fear, and I'm like, hallelujah. Fear is the problem. There are two root emotions. Every one of us only feels two emotions: fear and love. If you're living in a space of fear, you're in the wrong space. Every one of us only feels fear and love. And what I see a lot of is fear. Side note, yesterday, I was in a 5.5 hour public meeting. It's the best part of my job, by the way. 5.5 hours. That's why I get paid $3. And there were some moms that spoke during the public comment section of that meeting, and bless their hearts, I wanted to give them hugs. And many of them just burst into tears. And there was one mother who literally said, she said, I have 5 children, and my younger 2 children have not done a single activity at the house since last March.
Oh my God. Child abuse.
And she's begging me to put masks on everybody else's children so that she feels comfortable getting her children out of the house. And I wanted to give her a hug and say, sweetheart, that fear is not doing your immune system any good. But the fear that is living in people is, okay, you talk about you're not super into science. I'm an engineer by training, I'm in math, that's what I do. And I'm looking at fear creates, it releases little chemicals in your body that literally suppress your immune system. And as I'm listening to these women who are crying because they're so afraid, and I have to put this in perspective for you. I have lupus. I have autoimmune disease. I give myself an injection in my stomach every 14 days that suppresses my immune system. You want to talk about the immunocompromised? That's me. You want to talk about the immune suppressed? That's me. You want to talk about the high risk? Literally standing right here. And I made a decision in 2013 when I was first diagnosed, when I was first on immunosuppressants, and my son came home from school and he had a fever of 102, and I sent him to my mom's house because I said I can't.
Okay, folks, we're going to wrap up. We'll see you next week. Much love. Bye-bye.